Good morning. Russian kamikaze drones just violated NATO airspace in the most serious attack on Alliance territory this year. Up to 23 drones crossed into Poland, targeting major airports. I'm Remo, and this is the Daily Signal for September 12th, 2025. Stay tuned for the rest of the stories.
Unfiltered. Now.
Here are the other top stories for September 12th, 2025. Mexico City gas tanker explosion kills 8, injures 90. Victims suffer burns over 98% of their bodies. Trump schedules emergency Friday meeting with Qatar's prime minister following Israeli operations in Doha. China delivers harsh ultimatum to Mexico over new tariffs designed to appease Washington. Belarus suddenly frees dozens of political prisoners in exchange for U.S. sanctions relief. Israeli Prime Minister officially declares there will be no Palestinian state while signing massive settlement expansion. Russia demands Poland immediately reopen the Belarus border as tensions escalate. France's new Prime Minister faces nationwide block everything protests on his first day. Nepal's uprising reaches luxury hotels as protesters target the ultra-wealthy elite. NATO allies confirm Russian drone attack was deliberate test of alliance readiness. Now let's dive into each story. Breaking overnight, this was no accident. At least 19, possibly 23 Russian kamikaze drones deliberately penetrated Polish airspace on September 9th, targeting Warsaw International Airport, Modlin Airport, and 2 other major aviation hubs. Here's what happened. The attack began at 11:30 p.m. Central European Time. Polish Air Force pilots scrambled NATO Quick Reaction Alert aircraft and managed to shoot down 8 drones, but the others completed their reconnaissance missions. These weren't random strikes. Intelligence shows Russia specifically chose the Gerbera-type kamikaze drones to test NATO's air defense gaps. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk called this an attack on NATO and EU territory and immediately triggered Article 4 consultations. The most shocking detail? Poland's anti-drone Sky Toral system was offline due to delayed government funding. Why this matters? This is the largest direct assault on NATO territory since the alliance's formation. Russia now knows exactly where our air defenses are weakest. The horror in Mexico City continues to unfold. Wednesday's gas tanker explosion has now claimed 8 lives, with 90 people injured, and the injuries are catastrophic. A tanker carrying over 13,000 gallons of liquefied petroleum gas crashed and exploded under a highway overpass. The blast was so powerful, it damaged 32 vehicles and sent flames shooting hundreds of feet into the air. But here's the most heartbreaking detail. One grandmother suffered burns over 98% of her body while shielding her 2-year-old granddaughter from the fireball. 67 victims remain hospitalized, with 21 in critical condition. Many have clothing literally fused to their skin. Mexico City Mayor Clara Brugada declared a state of emergency. The investigation reveals criminal negligence. The truck displayed logos for energy company Silsa, but Silsa denies ownership. Authorities discovered the company lacked valid insurance for fuel transport, a violation that may have killed 8 people. Donald Trump will meet Qatar's prime minister this Friday in what sources describe as damage control following Israeli covert operations in Doha. This isn't a routine diplomatic meeting, it's crisis management. Israeli intelligence services reportedly conducted operations on Qatari soil without notification, putting Qatar in an impossible position between its relationships with Israel, Iran, and the United States. Qatar serves as a crucial mediator in Middle East conflicts and hosts the largest U.S. military base in the region. The Friday meeting will focus on preventing a complete diplomatic breakdown. Qatar has threatened to expel U.S. forces if Israeli operations continue without consultation. Why this matters to you? Any destabilization of U.S.-Qatar relations could disrupt global energy markets and military operations across the Middle East. China just delivered its harshest warning to Mexico in decades, threatening economic retaliation over new tariffs that Beijing sees as pathetic appeasement of Washington. Mexico recently imposed tariffs on Chinese goods to align with U.S. trade policies and qualify for USMCA benefits. China's response was swift and brutal. Ambassador Liu Xiaoming called the move a betrayal of economic sovereignty and warned of consequences that will harm Mexican families. The threat is real. China is Mexico's second-largest trading partner, purchasing $100 billion in Mexican goods annually. Beijing specifically threatened to cancel contracts for lithium mining, agricultural imports, and manufacturing partnerships. Mexico finds itself trapped between its largest trading partner, the United States, and its second-largest, China. President López Obrador's administration must choose sides in the escalating trade war. In a stunning reversal, Belarus has freed dozens of political prisoners in exchange for U.S. sanctions relief. But critics call this a cynical ploy by dictator Alexander Lukashenko. The prisoners, including journalists and opposition leaders, were released from Belarusian gulags where they faced torture and solitary confinement. Many were detained during the 2020 protests following Lukashenko's disputed election victory. The U.S. agreed to ease targeted sanctions on Belarusian officials and state-owned enterprises. However, human rights groups warn this sets a dangerous precedent, arresting innocents to later trade them for economic benefits. Here's the catch. Belarus kept its most prominent political prisoners, including several opposition leaders who could challenge Lukashenko's rule. This appears to be strategic. Release enough prisoners to get sanctions relief while keeping potential threats imprisoned. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made his most definitive statement yet on Palestinian statehood. There will be no Palestinian state, and he signed documents proving it. Netanyahu officially approved the E1 settlement expansion, which will connect Jerusalem to the Ma'ale Adumim settlement through occupied Palestinian territory. This expansion makes a contiguous Palestinian state geographically impossible. The signing ceremony was deliberate political theater, with Netanyahu declaring, "Israel will never divide Jerusalem or surrender territory that ensures our security." International reaction was swift. The European Union called it a violation of international law, while Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said it kills any hope for peace. Why this matters? This decision effectively ends the two-state solution that has been the foundation of Middle East peace efforts for 30 years. Russia is demanding Poland immediately reopen its border with Belarus, escalating tensions following the drone attack. This isn't diplomacy, it's intimidation. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called Poland's border closure economic terrorism and threatened asymmetric responses if trade doesn't resume. Poland closed the border after discovering Russian weapons shipments disguised as civilian cargo. The real issue: Poland's border closure blocks Russian goods from reaching Western European markets through Belarus. This costs Moscow approximately $2 billion monthly in trade revenue. Poland's response was firm: "We will not negotiate under the threat of drone attacks." NATO has reinforced the Polish border with additional troops and air defense systems. This standoff could trigger the alliance's Article 5 collective defense clause if Russia escalates further. France's new Prime Minister Michel Barnier faced nationwide block everything protests on his first day in office. The demonstrations shut down airports, trains, and government buildings across the country. The protesters, led by France's powerful unions, opposed Barnier's austerity plans and his appointment without legislative approval. Demonstrators chanted "Democracy denied" while occupying parliament buildings. Paris airports canceled 60% of flights, and the high-speed rail network stopped operating entirely. Government employees walked out, leaving key services paralyzed. President Emmanuel Macron appointed Barnier after months of political gridlock, but the move backfired spectacularly. Opposition leaders from both left and right united in calling for Macron's resignation. The crisis threatens France's economic stability and its leadership role in the European Union. Nepal's anti-corruption protests have taken a dramatic turn. Demonstrators are now targeting luxury hotels and elite establishments rather than just government buildings. Protesters stormed the Kathmandu Marriott and other five-star hotels, demanding records of politicians' meetings with foreign investors. They're exposing the luxury corruption network where government deals are made in private dining rooms. The movement began over earthquake reconstruction fund embezzlement, but has evolved into class warfare. Protesters discovered that while earthquake victims still live in temporary shelters, politicians spent millions on luxury hotel meetings with Chinese and Indian investors. Young Nepalis, facing 25% unemployment, are leading the charge. They've occupied parliament buildings, luxury shopping districts, and private clubs frequented by the political elite. The government declared a state of emergency, but police largely refused to crack down on protesters, many of whom are their own family members affected by corruption. Now let's connect these stories because they reveal three critical global patterns that will shape your future. First, the collapse of diplomatic norms. From Russian drones attacking NATO to Israeli operations in Qatar without warning, traditional diplomacy is dead. Nations are acting unilaterally, creating chaos that threatens global stability. Second, the weaponization of economics. China threatening Mexico, Russia pressuring Poland, and Belarus trading prisoners for sanctions relief. Economic warfare has replaced military conflict as the primary tool of international pressure. Third, the rise of popular fury against elites. From France's Block Everything protests to Nepal targeting luxury hotels, ordinary people worldwide are rejecting traditional political systems that serve the wealthy while ignoring basic needs. These aren't separate crises. They're symptoms of a world order that's collapsing faster than new institutions can replace it. The next decade will determine whether we build something better or descend into greater chaos. Stay informed, stay engaged, and remember that understanding these connections gives you power to prepare for what's coming. This is Remo with the Daily Signal. Subscribe for tomorrow's breaking analysis, and remember, knowledge is your best defense in an uncertain world.
Unfiltered. Now.